Hello, Zoo Med fans. We're here at AnimalCon 2023, still on day one, and I'm here with Peter. Peter, you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yes, most definitely. I'm Peter Birch. I'm from Australia, so I might speak a little bit funny, but that's what we do down and under. And my channel is CrittaCam.
CrittaCam. So
Yep.
what do you do on CrittaCam? What's your platform? What do you like to work on?
Okay, so my main focus is really reptile husbandry. So based from reptiles is sort of my real niche. But I also use the platform to obviously, wherever possible, take notice to some conservation issues. Yeah, whether it be recently I've been to South Africa and was involved in some rhino dehorning. So I was very fortunate to do that. But obviously back home, you know, things like sea turtle rescues, you know, all those sort of bits and
that's
pieces.
wonderful.
It's a little bit weird.
What were you, that's really interesting, the whole rhino dehorning. What were you actively doing while you were there?
Okay, so I went to South Africa on a bit of a trip, but you know, playing with crocodiles and venomous snakes. Some of the venomous snakes we don't get in Australia, so it's a little bit different exposure. You sort of get a little bit crazy sometimes, you know, seeing some big crocodiles, working with the big crocs, the Nile crocs, very different to the Australian saltwater crocs.
Sure.
So, you know, we do share a lot of similarities between our continents, but our continents also have a lot of diversity. So to experience the diversity in another continent is pretty cool. And, you know, the rhino dehorning, I was fortunate enough to, you know, we actually made a financial contribution that was able to go directly into rhino conservation. I mean, they put collars basically on the rhino's feet. They're basically a GPS location system. It detects heart monitoring system. So if the animal gets stressed,
Sure.
they get a location and then they can actually go out and see what's wrong with the animals.
Deterring poaching. Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
You said you keep yourself. What do you keep? What do you work with?
Okay, so basically I work with all the Australian species because we can't keep anything else in our country, unfortunately, except for Australian species. And
Not like you don't have anything cool in Australia, though, right?
no, well, we do have some of the coolest stuff. I mean, I don't take it for granted. I think we've got some of the coolest snakes in the world. So I particularly work with the Antaresia species, so which are the small pythons. You know, they get to about 3 to 4 feet in maximum length, and that's sort of my forte. I'm pretty well known for working with those guys. I breed locality species, so and also work with the morph, so the different color variation stuff.
Anything in particular in those that's like your favorite? Like, this is like my favorite animal that I work with.
Well, funny enough, probably my favorite snake is a snake I've had since 1994. It's an absolutely just a normal color patterned animal, and he's my favorite snake. Now, I did a lot of mobile education sort of stuff for about 15 years, and he was part of that system where we'd go out and we'd educate people about handling and working with these beautiful snakes. And he's an absolute darling of a snake. And I mean, he's still my favorite today because he's so reliable and he's so amazing. And through watching people interact with him, sort of took me to that next level. And that's the reason why I started using YouTube and all the other social media to grow my platform and change direction.
So he's a seasoned expert at this.
Well,
just like you.
Well, he's probably more professional than me.
You have.
He's more professional than me because he doesn't bite.
He doesn't
bite. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm unreliable and I might bite.
Do you have any plans for any future animal species that you're not working with now that you'd like to work with down the road? You've been doing this a long time, so it's probably a short list at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work with a wide variety of Australian species, but there is a particular species of dragon basically in Australia. It's called the chameleon dragon. It doesn't have any representation in the private hobby, and it doesn't really have a representation in the zoo system. So if those things became available, I'd be really interested to work with them, simply because, like I said, there's no representation in the hobby. If we don't spend time working with these things that don't have, you know, or aren't in the business, then they're going to fade out and disappear.
Absolutely.
So they live in a very small isolated area in Northern Territory, and I think that would be a really cool animal to work with, and I don't think anyone's ever done that.
Why do you think nobody's ever done it? Are it just hard to find, or hard?
Well, they are particularly difficult to find in the wild, but they basically, I've never seen them in Australian zoos. They're not in Australian collections, but there is a small population, so it'd be great that if we can make that transition into the hobby or into a zoo system where we could maintain a population.
Have you encountered them in the wild? Have you come across them?
No, I haven't.
No?
I haven't.
No?
I've been in the right areas, I've looked around, but I haven't actually found them yet.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah.
So what got you into, like, go back to the beginning, what got you into keeping? Like, what interest, where did it all start?
So I guess we call it a gateway moment.
That's, yep.
And the gateway moment for me was when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was playing in a sand pit. So it's Australia, right? So we don't have any high-tech stuff down under, you know, we're a little bit behind the times. So I was playing in a sand pit at a very young age, and I found a blue-tongued lizard. Now, I picked this lizard up, and of course the teacher came out and yelled and screamed because it's a snake, it's deadly and all this sort of stuff. But it wasn't. It was a lizard. You know, it was completely harmless. But what happens in Australia, because we have a lot of venomous snakes,
Sure.
and they typically, you know, populate the same areas we populate. So we cross paths on a very regular basis. So therefore, ideology back in the old days was any good snake's good, you know, got to be a dead snake. So which is scary and horrible all in the same aspect. So my moment that opened my brain was basically that interaction with the blue tongue. And from that, I was interested because, you know, sometimes you try and force people away from things and they go directly back to it.
Sure.
That was me. I was drawn back to it. The next time, I guess, the next major memory I have is when I was 8 years old. I was catching lizards. So once again, tried to talk me out of it, but I was straight back into it. Catching lizards on my grandfather's farm. And I thought I seen a lizard and I grabbed this tail and I picked it up. Now I was 8 years old and I picked up this thing and the tail was very long and it didn't have any legs. It was a red-bellied black snake, a venomous snake from Australia. And I picked it up, and of course, as soon as I realised it was a snake, I dropped it and the thing took off. Now, from that moment, I was really interested in the next level, obviously, with snakes.
Sure.
Maybe not just venomous snakes, but snakes in general. And of course, it just sort of starts to snowball from there, you know. I started getting more interested in snakes and watching snakes in the fields and in the paddocks, sort of sitting up, looking around and being very interested in their movement and the way they did things. And then from that, you know, days before the internet and, you know, computers in our pockets, our phones and stuff like that, we actually had to, you know, go to the library, so jump on your push bike, ride down to the local library, get a book, read the book, try and learn more about the biology of these animals and the ecology, which is very important. So from there, you know, I started becoming more interested in the environments these animals lived, the plants, the other animals around there that would support the particular animals I was looking for, like target species. So therefore, you know, you start learning from the ground aspect up and up and up. It's not just, I like snakes. It's like, I like snakes, but to like snakes, I need to know where they live,
understand
how they live, what they feed on, and what feeds them. So you start learning the whole pyramid of life, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's what.
And it's sort of just
When
bigger and
did
bigger.
that evolve into keeping?
Basically, my grandfather, so around about the age of 8 years old, I was fortunate enough, every time I go on a school holiday, I go spend time on my grandfather's farm out in the bush. And every time I went there, I'd catch a lizard. And the rules were I was allowed to catch it and take it home. So I lived in the city. I was allowed to take it back home as long as the next school holidays I brought the animal back and released it. So therefore, I had to learn to keep these animals alive, because if I didn't bring it back, if something happened, number one, you know, back in the good old days, you get a good whooping.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you know, you're disappointed in yourself because you've killed an animal.
Absolutely.
But the good thing about that was you get a very steep learning curve, the things that you should and shouldn't do, and how to look after these animals to make them survive. And I mean, there was no really any information about keeping animals in captivity in Australia. We always looked at you guys, you know, because you guys were leading the race. For us, right up until, I guess, the mid-90s, we were still looking at the Americans because you guys were starting to breed stuff. We were just still maintaining animals in captivity. So, you know, it really changed. And it just sort of, like I said, from there it just stepped up and stepped up until 1997 in Australia, especially New South Wales. We couldn't keep reptiles as pets, not at all.
Okay.
So if you had a reptile and you were caught with it, like back in my old days, you could actually get a fine and probably face prosecution. So very different.
Right.
97 come along, licensing came in. I established a small business because I already had a bit of information, a bit of background working with reptiles, and my private business sort of based off that, and we sort of launched from there.
That's wonderful. That's really great. I mean, and forgive my ignorance, you know, I didn't realize when the law has changed. But at the point now, so, you know, you have the proper licensing. Are you able to collect whatever you want, or is there restrictions, or how does that even work?
Yeah, Australia is the one country where we have this horrible thing. We're heavily regulated. Every state has their own licensing system. It's all heavily regulated, so we can't catch from the wild. We can't take from the wild. Everything has to be bred in captivity. Everything has to be tracked and traceable. So if I sell you some snakes, you have to have a license.
Okay.
You've got to exchange license details. I tell them that I sold animals to you. You tell them that you bought animals off me. And then the authorities will cross-reference that and keep an eye on everything. So yeah, it's very different.
You do have some amazing animals though, so it must be worth it.
Oh, definitely.
I mean,
I think I live on the greatest planet, greatest country on the earth.
Do you have any advice to future, and it's a little different, you know, a lot of this audience, you know, for us is in the US, but, you know, do you have any advice to Australian keepers, US keepers, anybody who's looking to get into reptile keeping or creating content like you do now.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for the younger generation?
So basically my advice for reptile keepers and people that are passionate about animals is if you're new and you don't know what you want to work with, pick something you're going to love. Don't do it for money. Don't do it for fame. Do it for the passion. You know, find something you love and work with it, because if you get money, that's an advantage. If you get fame, that's an advantage. But if nothing else happens, you're still working with animals you love, right? And that's what it should all be about. And in sharing the passion and the love, you know, you put it out there and you'll find the people that are like-minded and they'll reciprocate.
It's great advice, Peter.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of AnimalCon.
No worries. Thank you.